The sharp crack of the judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom, slicing through the tense silence like a warning shot. Every eye in the room snapped to attention, the air thick with anticipation and unease. In the front row, a 10-year-old boy sat stiffly, his small hands folded tightly in his lap, a fresh bandage peeking out from beneath the cuff of his jeans. The courtroom's collective gaze lingered on him, the innocence of his youth stark against the harsh reality of what had brought them all together. Gasps rippled through the gallery as the judge's stern voice rang out, demanding order. The boy's mother reached over, squeezing his shoulder with trembling fingers, her own face etched with worry and exhaustion. Across the aisle, the dog owner sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes darting nervously between the judge and the boy. The tension between the two families was palpable, a silent war waged in glances and clenched fists. Outside, the world continued as usual, but inside these four walls, time seemed to slow, every heartbeat echoing with the weight of what had happened. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and the room seemed to shrink, drawing everyone closer to the moment that had changed everything. What happened on that quiet street would leave the entire community shaken, a single act rippling outward in ways no one could have predicted. As the judge prepared to speak, the audience held its breath, knowing that the truth about that fateful afternoon was about to be laid bare. In that instant, the courtroom was united by a single, unspoken question: how could something so ordinary turn so suddenly into a nightmare? The story began on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that should have ended with laughter and homework, not hospital visits and courtroom summons. 10-year-old Samuel Martinez was walking home from school, his backpack bouncing with each step, his mind on nothing more than a snack and his favorite video game. But as he turned the corner onto Maple Lane, his world collided with that of his neighbor, Ms. Rodriguez, and her dog, a white, fluffy mix known to most as Max. What happened next would fracture the peace of their quiet neighborhood. In a matter of seconds, Max lunged, teeth flashing, and Samuel's cry pierced the air. The bite was swift but deep, leaving a jagged wound on the boy's leg and a trail of panic in its wake. Ms. Rodriguez, caught between her stroller and the leash, struggled to regain control, but the damage was done. Samuel limped home, blood staining his jeans, his innocence forever marked by the violence of that moment. Now, in the stark light of the courtroom, the conflict was laid bare for all to see. On one side sat Samuel and his parents, their faces drawn with worry and anger, their voices trembling as they recounted the events. They spoke not only of physical pain, the stitches, the shots, the sleepless nights, but of the fear that now haunted their son, the way he flinched at the sound of barking, the nightmares that left him crying in the dark. Across from them, Ms. Rodriguez sat with her hands clasped tightly, her expression a mix of defensiveness and regret. She insisted Max had never bitten anyone before, that he was startled, that she had done everything she could. But the community's trust was shaken, and the question of responsibility hung heavy in the air. The stakes were clear: Samuel's recovery, the safety of every child on Maple Lane, and the future of a dog who had crossed the line. The courtroom became a stage for a larger debate: innocence versus accountability, the vulnerability of a child against the duty of an adult. As the judge prepared to hear testimony, everyone present understood that the outcome would echo far beyond these walls, shaping the way neighbors looked at each other and the rules they lived by. Samuel's mother, Maria Martinez, took a steadying breath as she rose to speak, her voice trembling but determined. She glanced at her son, who sat quietly beside her, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Your Honor," she began, "I want you to understand what happened to my son, not just as a case number, but as a little boy who was simply trying to get home. Samuel had always been independent," she explained, proud of walking the few blocks from school to their house. That day, the sun was shining, and the air was filled with the sounds of children laughing and birds chirping. Samuel's backpack was heavy with books, but his steps were light, his mind already drifting to the snack he'd have when he got home. He waved to a neighbor, skipped over a crack in the sidewalk, and turned onto Maple Lane, a street he'd walked 100 times before. But as he neared the intersection, he saw Ms. Rodriguez approaching with her dog and a baby stroller. Samuel remembered the dog from a distance, white, fluffy, always barking behind the fence. He'd never been afraid before, but that day, something felt different. The dog was restless, pulling at the leash, its growls low and insistent. Ms. Rodriguez called out, "Don't do it, Max," but her voice was strained, her attention divided between the dog and the stroller. Samuel tried to give them space, stepping to the side as he passed. But in a flash, Max lunged, circling behind Ms. Rodriguez and sinking his teeth into Samuel's leg. The pain was immediate and sharp, a burning sensation that shot up his body. Samuel cried out, stumbling backward, his hands instinctively reaching for the wound. Blood began to seep through his jeans, and the world seemed to tilt, the sounds of the street fading into a blur of panic and confusion. Ms. Rodriguez struggled to control Max, her words lost in the chaos. Samuel looked at her, expecting help, an apology, something, but she said nothing. Shaken and in pain, Samuel limped the rest of the way home, his mind racing with fear and disbelief. When he reached the front door, Maria saw the blood and rushed to his side, her heart pounding with terror. Maria's voice broke as she described the aftermath, the frantic drive to the emergency room, the doctors cleaning the wound, the shots Samuel had to endure. "He was so brave," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "But he kept asking me, why did the dog bite me? Did I do something wrong?" The question haunted her, a mother's worst nightmare realized. Samuel, encouraged by his mother, spoke next. His voice was soft but clear, each word measured and honest. He described the moment Max bit him, the shock and pain, the way he froze, unsure what to do. "I didn't say anything to the lady," he admitted. "I just wanted to go home." He remembered the fear in his chest, the way his legs shook as he walked, the embarrassment of crying in front of his mom. The days that followed were filled with doctor visits, bandage changes, and restless nights. Samuel couldn't sleep, haunted by nightmares of dogs chasing him. He was afraid to walk to school, afraid to play outside, afraid of every bark he heard. Maria described how her once confident son now hesitated at the door, his independence replaced by anxiety. The emotional toll was just as real as the physical pain. Samuel's friends visited, bringing cards and treats, but he struggled to smile. He asked his parents if they could move, if they could get a fence, if he'd ever feel safe again. Maria and her husband tried to reassure him, but the fear lingered, a shadow over their home. As Maria finished her testimony, the courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. She looked at the judge, her voice steady but pleading. "We're not here for revenge. We just want to make sure this never happens to another child. We want Samuel to feel safe again. We want our neighborhood to be a place where kids can walk home without fear." The judge nodded, the gravity of the moment clear. The story of Samuel's pain and resilience had touched every heart in the room, setting the stage for the difficult questions that would follow. Ms. Rodriguez rose from her seat, her movements stiff and deliberate. She smoothed the front of her blouse, eyes darting briefly to Samuel before settling on the judge. Her jaw was set, lips pressed into a thin line, as if she were bracing herself for a storm. The courtroom's attention shifted, the air thick with expectation and unspoken judgment. When asked to speak, Ms. Rodriguez's voice was steady but tinged with defensiveness. "Your Honor, first, I want to say I'm sorry that Samuel was hurt. I truly am. But Max has never bitten anyone before. He's always been a good dog, and I've always kept him on a leash." She glanced at the gallery, searching for a sympathetic face, but found only wary eyes and furrowed brows. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse as she continued. "That day, I was walking Max and pushing my baby in the stroller. I saw Samuel coming, and I moved to the side to give him space. Max was a little agitated, but I had him under control. I told him, 'Don't do it,' because he sometimes gets excited around kids, but he's never been aggressive." Her words hung in the air, a careful balance between apology and self-justification. The judge's gaze was unyielding, and Ms. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't see exactly what happened. One moment Samuel was walking by, the next Max was barking and pulling. I pulled him back right away. I didn't realize he'd actually bitten Samuel until later. If I had known, I would have helped. I would have called for help or gone to his house myself." Her tone grew more insistent, as if trying to convince herself as much as the court. I'm a mother too. I would never want a child to be hurt. But Max isn't a dangerous dog. He's part of our family. I don't want people to think he's a monster. Throughout her testimony, Ms. Rodriguez avoided looking directly at Samuel, her eyes flickering between the judge and her own hands. The contrast between her guarded posture and Samuel's quiet vulnerability was stark. Where the boy's pain was open and raw, Ms. Rodriguez's emotions were tightly controlled, her words carefully chosen to defend herself and her dog. The tension in the room was palpable, each side locked in their own version of the truth. As Ms. Rodriguez finished, the judge's expression remained unreadable, the next phase of the case poised to dig deeper into the facts and the feelings that divided the two families. The judge called for the first pieces of evidence, and the courtroom's attention sharpened. Maria stepped forward, carefully placing a folder on the bench. Inside were medical reports detailing Samuel's injuries, a deep puncture wound, torn skin, and the risk of infection. The doctor's notes described the necessity of multiple shots, tetanus, antibiotics, and, until the dog's vaccination status was confirmed, a series of rabies injections. The judge read the reports in silence, the clinical language unable to mask the pain behind each word. Next came the photographs. Enlarged and displayed for the court, they showed Samuel's leg, swollen and bruised, the bite marks angry and red against his skin. The images drew a collective wince from the gallery. Even Ms. Rodriguez looked away, her face paling as the evidence was laid bare. The judge studied the photos, then turned to Samuel. "Samuel, can you tell us what happened in your own words?" the judge asked gently. Samuel nodded, his voice steady but quiet. "I was walking home. I saw Ms. Rodriguez and her dog. I tried to go around them, but the dog started barking and jumped at me. He bit my leg. It hurt a lot. I didn't know what to do, so I just went home." His honesty was disarming, his account simple and free of embellishment. The judge nodded, making notes. The defense was then invited to respond. Ms. Rodriguez's attorney stood, presenting their own version of events. "Your Honor, my client maintains that Max was startled. There was no intent to harm. Ms. Rodriguez did everything she could to control the situation. She regrets what happened and wishes she could change it." The judge pressed further, asking about Max's behavior and history. Ms. Rodriguez hesitated, then replied, "He's never bitten anyone before. He barks, but he's not aggressive. I've always been careful, especially with my baby in the stroller." A neighbor, Mrs. Evans, was called as a witness. She lived 2 houses down and had seen the aftermath. "I heard a scream and looked out my window. I saw Samuel limping away, holding his leg. Ms. Rodriguez was trying to calm her dog, but she didn't go after Samuel. I thought it was strange she didn't check on him." The judge's questions grew more pointed. "Ms. Rodriguez, did you attempt to follow Samuel or notify his parents?" Ms. Rodriguez shook her head. "I didn't realize how serious it was. I thought he was just scared." The courtroom murmured, the tension mounting. The judge reviewed the leash laws and asked about Max's vaccination records, which Ms. Rodriguez provided. Everything appeared in order, but the unease lingered. Then, the judge paused, looking over the evidence once more. "We have medical reports, photographs, and witness testimony. But was this the first time the dog had bitten someone?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Ms. Rodriguez's face tightened, her hands clenching in her lap. The gallery leaned forward, sensing a shift. The judge's words were deliberate, the implication clear. The case might not be as simple as it first appeared. The possibility of a hidden history, of past incidents unreported or overlooked, cast a new shadow over the proceedings. As the judge called for a recess, the courtroom buzzed with speculation. The evidence had painted a vivid picture of pain and fear, but the truth about Max, and the responsibilities of those who cared for him, remained uncertain. The next phase would dig deeper, searching for answers that could change everything. The judge leaned forward, her gaze sweeping the room with practiced intensity. She began with Samuel, her tone gentle but direct. Samuel, you said the dog circled behind Ms. Rodriguez before biting you. Did you feel threatened before that moment? Samuel shook his head. No, ma'am. I was just trying to walk past. I didn't think anything would happen. The judge nodded, her expression softening. You did nothing wrong, Samuel. Thank you for being honest. Turning to Ms. Rodriguez, the judge's demeanor shifted, becoming firmer. Ms. Rodriguez, you stated Max has never bitten anyone before. Yet you told the dog, don't do it. What exactly were you concerned he might do? Ms. Rodriguez hesitated, searching for words. He sometimes jumps or barks at people, but he's never bitten. I just wanted to be careful. The judge pressed on. If you were concerned enough to warn him, why not take extra precautions, especially with a child approaching and a baby in your care? Ms. Rodriguez's voice wavered. I thought I had him under control. I didn't expect him to bite. The judge's eyes narrowed. Control means preventing harm, not reacting after the fact. Did you consider using a muzzle or keeping more distance from pedestrians? Ms. Rodriguez shook her head, her confidence faltering. The judge then addressed both parties, her voice resonant with authority. This court is not here to demonize dogs or their owners, but to determine responsibility. Children have a right to feel safe in their own neighborhood. Owners have a duty to anticipate and prevent foreseeable harm. The facts show a child was hurt, and that cannot be ignored. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Samuel, you showed great courage today. Ms. Rodriguez, your intentions may not have been malicious, but intentions do not erase consequences. The judge's interventions cut through the tension, demanding clarity and accountability from both sides, and reminding everyone that justice is not about blame, but about truth and protection for the vulnerable. Just as the courtroom seemed to settle into a rhythm of testimony and rebuttal, the judge announced that a new witness had come forward. The bailiff opened the door, and in walked Mr. Patel, a neighbor from 3 houses down. He looked uneasy as he took the stand, glancing nervously at Ms. Rodriguez before addressing the judge. Your Honor, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but after hearing what happened to Samuel, I felt I had to speak up, Mr. Patel began, his voice trembling slightly. About a month ago, I was walking my own dog past Ms. Rodriguez's house. Max was in the yard, barking and growling at the fence. I thought it was just noise, but then he lunged at the gate, snapping and snarling. I had to pull my dog away. I didn't report it because I figured he was just being territorial, but now I wonder if I should have. The judge's eyes narrowed, and the gallery murmured in surprise. Ms. Rodriguez's face flushed, her hands tightening in her lap. The judge asked, Did Max ever get out of the yard or approach you directly? Mr. Patel shook his head. No, but it was enough to make me cross the street after that. I didn't want any trouble. Before the judge could respond, another hand went up in the gallery. Mrs. Evans, the earlier witness, spoke again. I remember last summer, Max got loose and chased after a delivery driver. The man had to jump back into his van. He wasn't bitten, but he was definitely scared. I saw it from my window. The judge turned to Ms. Rodriguez, her tone sharp. Ms. Rodriguez, were you aware of these incidents? Ms. Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper. I knew about the delivery driver, but I thought it was just a one-time thing. Max has always been protective, but I never thought he'd actually hurt someone. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted, the tension now laced with a sense of inevitability. The judge looked around, her voice grave. It appears there were warning signs, incidents that, while not resulting in injury, suggested a pattern of aggressive behavior. This raises a difficult question for us all. Could this have been prevented? A hush fell over the room as the implications settled in. Parents in the gallery exchanged worried glances, and Ms. Rodriguez stared at her hands, the weight of responsibility pressing down. The judge's words echoed in the silence, leaving everyone to wonder what might have been different if those earlier warnings had been heeded. The case had taken a new turn, and the search for answers and accountability was far from over. The judge's gaze fixed on Ms. Rodriguez, her tone unyielding as she pressed further. Ms. Rodriguez, you've now heard testimony from two neighbors describing previous incidents involving Max. You said earlier that he's never been aggressive, yet these accounts suggest otherwise. Can you explain this contradiction? Ms. Rodriguez's composure began to crack. She shifted in her seat, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. I didn't think those things were serious, she stammered. He barks, yes, but he's never bitten anyone before, Samuel. I thought he was just being protective. I never imagined he would actually hurt a child. The judge leaned in, her voice growing sharper. But you were aware that Max had chased a delivery driver and frightened other neighbors. Did you ever consider that these were warning signs? Did you take any steps to address his behavior, training, a muzzle, keeping him away from the fence? Ms. Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears. I guess I just hoped he would calm down. I have a baby at home, and things have been stressful. I didn't want to believe he was dangerous. I thought if I kept him on a leash, it would be enough. The judge's questioning intensified, her words cutting through the defendant's defenses. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to public safety. You had information that Max could be unpredictable, yet you continued to walk him near children and others without additional precautions. Do you understand the risk you were taking, not just with your own family, but with your entire community? Ms. Rodriguez's voice broke. I do now. I'm so sorry. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I didn't know what else to do. I thought I was being careful, but maybe I wasn't careful enough. The judge paused, letting the silence stretch. The gallery watched, some with sympathy, others with frustration. Samuel's mother wiped away a tear, her son's hand clutched tightly in hers. The judge continued, Ms. Rodriguez, you said earlier that you didn't realize Samuel had been bitten until later. Yet witnesses saw you struggling with Max and saw Samuel limping away. Why didn't you check on him? Why didn't you follow up with his family? Ms. Rodriguez's shoulders slumped. I was overwhelmed. The baby was crying, Max was barking, and I just wanted to get home. I told myself it wasn't serious, that maybe he was just scared. I know now that was wrong. I should have gone after him. I should have made sure he was okay. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. The judge's face softened, but her voice remained firm. Negligence is not always about intent. Sometimes it's about failing to act when you should have known better. The law expects more from those entrusted with the care of animals, especially when children are involved. Ms. Rodriguez wiped her eyes, her defenses finally crumbling. I'm sorry, Samuel. I'm sorry to your family. I wish I could take it back. The judge nodded, acknowledging the apology but not absolving the responsibility. The unraveling of Ms. Rodriguez's story had revealed not malice, but a series of poor choices and missed warnings. The courtroom was silent, the consequences of those choices now painfully clear. The case was no longer just about a single bite, but about the duty every adult owes to protect the vulnerable, and the cost of ignoring that duty until it's too late. The judge surveyed the courtroom, her eyes lingering on Samuel, then on Ms. Rodriguez, and finally on the anxious faces in the gallery. The tension was palpable, every breath held in anticipation. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights and the distant shuffling of feet. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone, the outcome poised to ripple far beyond these four walls. After hearing all the testimony and reviewing the evidence, the judge began, her voice steady and commanding. It is clear that this was not an isolated incident. There were warning signs, incidents that should have prompted greater caution. While I believe Ms. Rodriguez did not intend harm, her failure to act on those warnings resulted in serious consequences for Samuel and his family. A murmur swept through the gallery, parents exchanging glances, some nodding in agreement, others wiping away tears. Samuel's mother squeezed his hand, relief and vindication flickering across her face. The judge continued, Samuel, you have shown remarkable courage. No child should have to fear walking home from school. Ms. Rodriguez, as a pet owner and a parent, you have a responsibility to protect not only your own family but your neighbors as well. That responsibility was not met. She paused, letting the words settle. Therefore, I am ordering that Ms. Rodriguez cover all of Samuel's medical expenses, including ongoing therapy if needed. Max must be enrolled in professional training, and until a behavioral specialist deems him safe, he is to be muzzled in public. Furthermore, I am mandating a community meeting to address pet safety and prevent future incidents. The judge's gavel struck the bench, the sound echoing like a promise. Let this serve as a reminder: justice is not just about punishment, but about protecting the vulnerable and learning from our mistakes. This community must come together to ensure every child feels safe. As the verdict settled over the room, the sense of relief was palpable. Justice had been served, not just for Samuel, but for every family on Maple Lane. In the days that followed the verdict, a quiet transformation swept through Maple Lane. Samuel's family, once gripped by anxiety, found a sense of peace returning to their home. The bandages on Samuel's leg were replaced by fading scars, and with each passing day, his confidence grew. He began to walk to school again, this time with friends by his side and a new sense of security. His parents watched him from the window, their hearts lighter, knowing the community had rallied to protect its children. For Ms. Rodriguez, the consequences were sobering. She enrolled Max in professional training, attending every session with determination and humility. The muzzle, once a symbol of shame, became a sign of her commitment to change. She apologized to Samuel's family in person, her words sincere and her actions consistent. The experience left her more vigilant, not just with Max, but in her role as a neighbor and a parent. She joined the community meeting, sharing her story and urging others to learn from her mistakes. The community itself responded with unity. The meeting called by the judge was well attended, neighbors gathering in the local school gym to discuss pet safety and responsibility. Stories were shared, concerns voiced, and new guidelines established. Fences were checked, leashes replaced, and a renewed sense of watchfulness took root. Parents exchanged phone numbers, children were reminded of safe routes, and the neighborhood became a place where everyone looked out for one another. Samuel's friends, once hesitant to visit, returned to his yard with soccer balls and laughter. The fear that had shadowed their play faded, replaced by the simple joys of childhood. Samuel's parents, grateful for the support they received, volunteered to help other families navigate similar challenges. The pain of the past was not forgotten, but it was transformed into a lesson that strengthened the bonds of the community. Ms. Rodriguez, too, found a measure of redemption. She became an advocate for responsible pet ownership, speaking at local events and helping others recognize the signs of aggression in their own animals. Her willingness to change inspired others, and over time, trust was slowly rebuilt. The judge's ruling echoed beyond the courtroom, shaping the daily lives of everyone on Maple Lane. The message was clear: justice is not just about punishment, but about growth, accountability, and the safety of all. The community learned that vigilance and compassion must go hand in hand, and that true safety comes from shared responsibility. As the seasons changed and the memory of that day softened, Samuel's story became a reminder of what can happen when a community chooses to act rather than ignore. The scars on his leg faded, but the lessons endured, woven into the fabric of neighborhood life. What would you do if this happened in your neighborhood? Would you speak up, take action, and help protect those who cannot protect themselves? The answer, as Maple Lane discovered, can change everything.